Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really brief, but honestly incredibly potent summary of one of the most shocking upsets in modern boxing history.
Yeah, it's a fascinating piece of source material.
It really is. So the text we're analyzing today focuses on that legendary match between Victor Ortiz and the undefeated Floyd Mayweather. And, what makes this specific text so compelling to me is its central thesis.
Right, because it entirely changes the narrative.
Exactly. It's not a story about a lack of talent or like a physical mismatch. The text explicitly points out that Ortiz came to the ring with impressive skills.
Yeah, absolutely belong there.
Right. Yet, despite having this masterful game plan and undeniable physical ability, the entire fight hinged on a single critical tactical error that just handed Mayweather the victory.
And the brevity of the source actually forces us to focus on that core mechanism of defeat. It kind of strips away the 12 rounds of boxing minutia.
Yeah, the noise.
Exactly, all the noise. And it demands that we look at the devastating cost of a single lapse in judgment. We're really examining the absolute fragility of strategy when it's exposed to, the highest levels of pressure.
It makes me think of, gemology, actually.
Wait, gemology? Like diamonds?
Yeah, like diamonds. When you picture a flawless diamond, you imagine it's practically indestructible, right?
Sure, yeah. Formed under immense pressure.
Exactly. Immense heat, immense pressure, polished to perfection. You feel like you could just hit it with a hammer and it would survive. But even the most flawless diamonds have cleavage planes.
Oh, right. The structural weaknesses.
Yeah, these structural weaknesses on an atomic level. If you tap that diamond with just a tiny amount of force, but at the exact right angle, it completely shatters into 1,000 pieces.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Right. And our source is essentially describing the moment Ortiz's diamond shattered. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly appreciate the magnitude of a strategy collapsing from a single mistake, we first have to understand the psychological atmosphere established right at the start of our text.
Which is incredibly intense from the jump.
Yeah. The source creates this immediate juxtaposition for you. On one side, you have Ortiz, armed with highly praised, impressive skills, and on the other side, Mayweather, defined by one very specific, terrifying word.
Undefeated.
Undefeated. It's heavy. Which makes me wonder, I want to compare this to playing chess against a supercomputer.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Imagine sitting down at the board. Your mid-game strategy is solid, your openings are memorized, your skills are genuinely impressive. But knowing that the machine across from you has never lost a game, does just knowing your opponent has never lost create a psychological weight that makes you second-guess your own impressive skills?
Oh, absolutely. It completely validates that feeling. The term undefeated carries a psychological weight that drastically alters the landscape of any competition.
Like it physically changes how your brain works in the moment.
Exactly. When you step into a contest against someone who is completely unblemished, your cognitive load just doubles.
Wow. Doubles.
Because you are no longer just processing the physical movements of the athlete in front of you, you are actively fighting the myth of their invincibility.
That is so true. The text really emphasizes Ortiz's impressive skills to make it clear that, on paper, he had the tools to win.
Right, he had the tactical tools. But executing those tools while operating under the shadow of a perfect record, it introduces a profound variable into the human brain.
Going back to that chess analogy, it's like you reach for a pawn to make a standard move, a well-practiced move, and suddenly your hand just hovers.
Yes, you start second-guessing.
You think, wait, this machine has never been beaten.
Yeah.
Is this standard move actually a trap? Am I playing right into it?
That friction is the perfect way to describe the degradation of elite performance. In high-stakes environments, second-guessing consumes vital mental bandwidth.
And bandwidth is everything.
It is. The human brain is essentially a predictive engine. When you're facing a normal opponent, your brain calculates probabilities based on their past mistakes.
Because you've seen them fail.
Exactly. But when facing the undefeated, the brain has no data on their failures, which forces it to overanalyze every single interaction.
So every twitch, every feint, it all feels magnified.
Amplified to 100. You become burdened by the awareness that any flaw in your own armor will be instantly punished. And ironically, this hyper-awareness makes an athlete rigid.
They freeze up.
Yeah, they stop executing their fluid game plan and start fighting the abstract concept of perfection.
So the gap between merely having impressive skills and actually securing a win at the elite level isn't found in physical conditioning at all.
Not at that level, no.
It's almost entirely a cognitive battle. It's a question of how much of your own strategy you can successfully retain when the ghosts of that perfect record is just staring you in the face.
The physical skills are merely the price of admission. Once you enter the arena at that tier, everyone has impressive skills.
Right, they wouldn't be there otherwise.
Exactly. The true contest is this invisible mental war of attrition. One competitor is actively working to maintain the structural integrity of their game plan, while the other is applying constant atmospheric pressure.
Just waiting for that focus to chip away.
Waiting for the crack. And the fact that our source zeroes in on Ortiz's skills really confirms that his downfall was not a failure of muscle or conditioning.
It was a failure of mental focus buckling under that invisible weight.
Precisely.
But, I mean, a mental failure eventually has to manifest as a physical action to actually lose a fight. You can't just lose in your head.
Right, it translates to the physical world.
And the text moves from establishing Ortiz's capabilities directly to a pivotal moment where Ortiz's strategy went wrong. And the wording there is incredibly specific.
It really is.
It doesn't suggest he was slowly physically worn down over 12 rounds. It explicitly states he made one critical mistake that cost him the fight. Just one.
Which tells you about the anatomy of a tactical disaster at the highest echelons. It usually comes down to a margin of error that has shrunk to absolute zero.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Can one single error really erase rounds of impressive skill?
Well,
Because think about any complex architecture, right? If you build a massive, intricate house and you accidentally install a single window slightly crooked, the house doesn't instantly collapse into a pile of rubble.
that's a fair point.
So is a strategy truly impressive if a single mistake completely dismantles it? It feels almost unfair to label a game plan as masterful if its structural integrity is that fragile.
This raises an important question, though. What is the true nature of strategy in a volatile, hyperdynamic environment?
Okay, I'm listening.
Because the architecture of a house is a static analogy, a house sits still. An elite boxing match, however, is a fluid, high-speed collision of variables.
So the house analogy doesn't quite fit.
Not quite. A more accurate comparison would be the engineering of a Formula One car taking a corner at 200 miles an hour.
Oh, I see the distinction. The velocity changes the consequence.
Precisely. The aerodynamics of that F1 car are impressive. The driver's reaction time is impressive, but if the driver makes one critical mistake, like a millimeter of oversteering or a microsecond delay in engaging the brake,
The car doesn't just get a minor dent.
no, it spins out into the wall and the race is instantly over. The strategy behind driving that car isn't fragile because it was poorly designed.
Right, it's a masterpiece of engineering.
It is fragile because the extreme velocity of the environment magnifies the consequence of the slightest deviation.
Wow, that completely reframes the entire concept of the upset for me. The impressiveness of Ortiz's strategy isn't negated by the fact that it failed. The environment itself is just so unforgiving that a single mental lapse acts exactly like that fractional delay on the F1 brake.
Exactly. And we must recognize that a tactical error in this context is rarely just a clumsy physical slip. A misaligned foot or a dropped hand is merely the trailing symptom of a cognitive breakdown.
The mistake happens in the brain first.
The critical mistake occurs in the mind first. It is a momentary detachment from the present reality of the contest. For whatever combination of reasons, be it fatigue, frustration, or that crushing psychological weight of the undefeated record we discussed earlier,
Ortiz allowed his strategic framework to drop for just a microsecond.
he mentally stepped out of the flow of his protective game plan, which created a physical vulnerability.
It is genuinely humbling to consider the demands of that environment. I mean, an athlete trains for months, sacrifices everything, builds this brilliant multi-layered tactical approach, and the entire edifice can evaporate because of a mental hiccup that lasts 1 second.
It's brutal.
You can't just be physically present in the ring. You have to remain cognitively anchored to your strategy for every single millisecond.
And maintaining that anchor requires immense cognitive endurance. When we read the source's description of a pivotal moment where strategy went wrong, we are essentially reading the time of death for that cognitive endurance.
The time of death. That's heavy.
The brain simply could not hold the complex framework of the strategy together under the atmospheric pressure of the fight.
But, the diamond only shatters if the hammer actually strikes it.
Right.
A lapse in focus is only fatal if the person across from you notices it and acts on it. If I oversteer my Formula One car on a completely empty practice track, I might wobble, maybe correct my trajectory, and just keep driving.
The wall has to be there for the mistake to turn into a disaster.
Exactly. And our source makes this abundantly clear. It doesn't just report that Ortiz made an error. It heavily emphasizes that Mayweather was immediately able to capitalize and secure the win.
The reaction to the error is arguably more critical than the error itself. Making a mistake is human. Capitalizing on it with zero hesitation requires a completely different level of conditioning.
This dynamic reminds me of high-level cybersecurity.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine a predatory algorithm, like a sophisticated piece of malware circling a corporate network. It doesn't necessarily utilize sheer brute force to smash down a heavily fortified firewall.
Because it doesn't need to.
Exactly. It simply pings the system, scanning the perimeter thousands of times a second, just waiting patiently in the background. And the absolute millisecond the system administrator makes a critical mistake. Maybe they drop the firewall for a routine update, or they misconfigure a single line of code.
The algorithm is in.
The algorithm detects the opening, capitalizes instantly, and extracts the data.
That malware analogy perfectly captures the nature of proactive versus reactive strategy. What's fascinating here is what this rapid capitalization implies about Mayweather's own mental focus.
Right, because his focus had to be perfect, too.
Exactly. While Ortiz's cognitive endurance fractured, allowing the mistake to manifest, Mayweather's focus was absolute and predatory.
He wasn't just defending.
No, he wasn't merely reacting to the punches being thrown at him. He was actively anticipating the inevitable degradation of his opponent's strategy.
He was the algorithm, constantly pinging the perimeter, testing the structural integrity of Ortiz's game plan, just waiting for that update to drop the firewall.
An undefeated record of that magnitude is rarely constructed by simply overpowering every opponent with brute physical force. The human body is too variable for that to be sustainable.
You'd eventually just get tired.
Right. Instead, a record like that is built on the philosophy of being perfectly primed to exploit the opponent's eventual imperfections.
It's inevitable.
Mayweather's overarching strategy was likely predicated on the deep understanding that human beings, when subjected to extreme pressure and cognitive load, will always eventually make a mistake.
So he didn't have to invent a miraculous path to victory out of thin air.
He simply had to manage his own energy, both physical and mental, and maintain a state of hypervigilance until Ortiz voluntarily offered him the cleavage plane.
So what does this all mean for you and me? I mean, we aren't all stepping into a professional boxing ring to face an undefeated champion, obviously.
No, thankfully.
But you and I, and the listener, we're all navigating high-pressure environments. We deal with critical projects, tense negotiations, career-defining moments where the margin for error is razor-thin. How do we train ourselves to be the one who capitalizes rather than the one who makes the error? How do you cultivate that specific brand of predatory vigilance?
Well, it requires a fundamental shift in how you process your environment. The vast majority of people enter a high-stakes situation focused entirely internally. They're consumed with their own performance. I need to hit my marks. I need to remember my key talking points. I need to successfully execute my impressive skills.
I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all are.
Yeah.
And to be clear, that internal focus is necessary as a baseline. You must know your material.
Right.
But the tier above, the tier that consistently capitalizes on opportunities, is characterized by external awareness. You must become so relentlessly comfortable with your own skills that your cognitive load is freed up to observe the landscape.
So you aren't just reciting your own strategy.
Exactly. You are actively reading the structural integrity of the people and variables around you, waiting to see where the tension causes a fracture.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It is the difference between staring at the cards in your own hand and watching the micro-expressions of the person sitting across the poker table.
Mayweather was playing the person.
He was waiting for the internal psychological weight to manifest as an external, physical, tactical error.
And when that physical error finally presented itself, his reaction appeared instantaneous. But it wasn't a reaction born of surprise. It was the execution of a contingency plan that had already been loaded in the chamber.
He already knew what he was going to do.
He had pre-calculated the cost of the error before Ortiz even made it. That is the true definition of capitalizing.
Which inherently leads us to the ultimate question posed by our source material. The text explicitly promises to explore what Ortiz could have done differently to potentially alter the outcome.
Because the mistake is already written in history.
Right. The punishment was absolute, so the only remaining value is the counterfactual. We have to perform the post-mortem analysis.
The post-mortem is the most vital tool in any strategic discipline. Studying success often just reinforces survival bias. Studying a shocking upset, however, provides a clear map of where the structural weaknesses lie.
But let me ask a probing question regarding preparation here, because the concept of an inevitable mistake is, frankly, daunting. Can you actually train a human being to avoid a critical mistake when the pressure's on? Or is it just human nature to eventually crack? Because if it's just a matter of time before cognitive focus drops, how can anyone possibly alter the outcome against an opponent who is just patiently waiting for the timer to run out?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, altering outcomes at this level requires an evolution in how we define and approach training itself.
How so?
If an athlete or a professional only trains their physical skills or memorizes their technical knowledge, they will absolutely crack under psychological pressure. As you pointed out, human biology dictates that focus degrades over time.
Right, adrenaline spikes.
Cortisol floods the system, vision narrows, and the brain naturally seeks shortcuts to conserve energy. The mistake is inevitable.
So if the mistake is inevitable, what could Ortiz or any of us actually do differently to survive it?
The training must move beyond physical repetition and incorporate stress inoculation. You cannot train yourself to be a flawless robot who never experiences a lapse in attention.
We're only human.
Exactly. But you can train your brain to recognize the internal physiological feeling of losing focus before the fatal error fully materializes in the physical world.
Oh, I see, like an internal alarm system.
Precisely. You put yourself in training scenarios where your strategy is actively being disrupted, where you are frustrated and cognitively exhausted, and you learn to identify the exact moment your mind begins to drift from the game plan.
So it's about closing the gap between the mental drift and the physical action. You might not stop the mental fatigue entirely, but you can catch the resulting physical misalignment before it is fully exposed to the opponent.
Resilience is not defined by the absence of mistakes. It is defined by the speed of recovery.
That's a great way to put it.
If Ortiz had an internal alarm that recognized his strategic framework was misaligning a fraction of a second earlier, he could have theoretically reset his posture, created distance, and re-engaged on his own terms.
But instead, the cognitive misalignment was allowed to turn into a fully realized physical mistake.
And the window of vulnerability was left open just long enough for Mayweather to secure the win. The source's analysis of what could be done differently ultimately points to this. Analyzing where and why your own strategy breaks down is the only way to build resilience against future fatal errors.
So asking the hard questions. Was the mistake born of frustration? Was it a false sense of security derived from his own impressive skills?
Identifying the root cause is how you fortify the cleavage plane.
It's exactly like reviewing the flight data recorder after an aviation incident. Investigators don't comb through that data to change the past.
They can't.
Right, they do it to write the safety manual for the future. You have to force yourself to look at the exact agonizing moment where the plan fell apart, strip away the emotion, the ego, the embarrassment, and coldly understand the mechanics of the failure.
That is the true value of what our source is offering boxing fans here. It's a chance to look at the data recorder of a monumental upset.
It really serves as a masterclass in the absolute necessity of relentless mental focus. Analyzing this fight strips away the comforting illusion that sheer skill alone is enough to conquer the highest peaks of competition.
It fundamentally changes how you view preparation and performance. You start merely admiring the impressive skills on display, and you start looking for the invisible tension.
You watch the interplay of cognitive endurance. You start looking for the tiny crack forming in the diamond.
Exactly.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We started with a source that presented a seemingly straightforward narrative. A shocking boxing upset, where Victor Ortiz, despite possessing highly impressive skills, made one critical tactical mistake that allowed the undefeated Floyd Mayweather to capitalize and win.
But by diving into the philosophy and psychology behind those brief facts, we've uncovered a massive landscape of strategic insight.
We've established that impressive skills are merely the baseline requirement for entry into any elite arena. They grant you access, but they do not guarantee victory.
Ultimate success against a formidable, unblemished opponent requires an impenetrable layer of mental focus to protect those physical skills.
We explored how a single tactical error is rarely just a physical slip, but a momentary collapse of cognitive endurance under the pressure of the undefeated myth. And we examined how the true hallmark of a reigning champion isn't necessarily magical invulnerability.
No, it's a predatory external vigilance, a readiness to exploit the exact microsecond their opponent's strategy misaligns.
A single fractional mistake against an opponent who is actively waiting to capitalize can permanently alter history. It demonstrates how quickly a masterpiece can become a shattered diamond.
And the only viable defense against that outcome is relentless self-analysis, understanding your own psychological vulnerabilities, and training your cognitive resilience to recognize the onset of a mistake before it is fully realized.
Which leaves us with a final, vital thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you step back into your own life. Think about your career, your personal projects, or your deepest passions. If you were facing your own undefeated opponent today, whether that is an intimidating rival business, a daunting creative endeavor, or simply a massively high-pressure situation, what is the one critical strategic mistake you are most vulnerable to making when the pressure spikes?
Where is the structural cleavage plane in your own impressive skills?
And more importantly, what can you do differently right now to fortify that weakness before someone else capitalizes on it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your own strategies, keep actively guarding your focus, and we'll see you next time.